Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Eczema Warrior podcast. Today, we have another special guest. We have Neil Dou, who is a registered acupuncturist here in British Columbia. He has been practicing as a acupuncturist for the past 5 years, and he also served as the vice president of ATCMA, which stands for the British Columbia Association of Traditional Chinese Medicine. He is also a registered member of the College of Complementary Health Professionals of BC, and I'm very excited today to have Neil here. We're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We're actually going to dive into the topic of long COVID, which I know a lot of people, maybe some of the listeners, have experienced or know of someone who has developed long COVID, and the connection between that and the immune system. And then we'll also chat a little bit about how it's related to eczema as well.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Julia, for inviting me. And of course, I'm very happy to be here, everyone.
Neil and I actually met, just a bit of an introduction, at a grand opening for your clinic along with a naturopathic doctor.
Yes.
So I'm excited to have him on to chat all about his experience with long COVID patients. Okay, to start off our podcast, Neil, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and why you became a acupuncturist?
Well, as Julia already mentioned who I am in the very beginning of this podcast, and I'm a registered acupuncturist, also a TCM professional. I mainly work with patients with chronic pain, and for ladies, gynecological issues, and of course, another aspect of my area of focus is to the internal medicine as well. Long COVID is actually a quite common problem among my current patient base. And a little bit of about myself, what got my practice into right now this current condition, or what got me into the TCM practice. It's actually from my family tradition that my parents and of course grandparents are mainly at the stream of traditional Chinese medicine, and I was just following about their paths. But the main person who really influenced me to get into TCM practice is about my grandfather. So I grew up with my grandfather a lot of times, and I've basically grew up in his clinic, very
Hmm.
familiar with his patients, seeing about all the styles or modalities he used in his practice to help all the patients. And of course, I see him prescribing herbal formulas, needling his patients, and of course, I do see good feedback from his patients. So that's what got me into the traditional Chinese medicine practice.
I love that. So your grandfather was he a TCM acupuncturist or a doctor?
He was a doctor of TCM.
Sometimes that's the best way to learn from your traditions and your parents and grandparents. I come from a family who really believes in TCM practice and medicine as well. We don't have a family member that's a TCM doctor, but we definitely followed the tradition and the recommendations when it comes to nutrition and lifestyle and even herbs. I remember drinking a lot of herbs growing up,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's like in our culture too.
Yes.
Okay, so long COVID. Let's talk a little bit about this topic. So, what exactly is long COVID and how does it happen in terms of people developing symptoms? From what I understand, kind of what I see in my practice is I see long COVID symptoms happen with skin issues. So, for example, my clients with eczema, their skin flares up after getting COVID infection. But I know with long COVID, there's a lot of very broad symptoms that are hard to explain. So, can you tell us a little bit about what long COVID is?
Well, for long COVID, of course, the official definition of this condition is that it's a chronic condition that, of course, is a cluster of symptoms, especially happen to the group or the patient base who caught COVID. And of course, the symptoms last for about 3 months or so, even more lingering times.
Mm.
For me, what I see in my patient base, I do see a lot of them have like flare-ups of eczema, skin issues, even like more easily catching carbuncles and acne. But the most common symptom of long COVID in my patient base currently is fatigue and, of course, brain fog, these kind of things. But since brain fog and fatigue are oftentimes people perceive as a habitual problem or habitual condition transferring from work from home back to in-person working, right? People don't really think or take it as a symptom or a long COVID, but instead they notice more of eczema and skin issue, and then that's the main reason they come to me. So quite interesting for long COVID. And of course, aside from these symptoms, I do have patients complaining about chronic muscle pain, developed after catching COVID, and of course, shortness of breath and persistent cough as well.
Interesting because fatigue is such a broad symptom, right? It could be related to your gut health, it could be related to not sleeping well or stress. How does one determine that their fatigue is caused by long COVID? Is it a diagnosis from their physician that you see in practice?
Mm, yes and no. Basically, the patient will come to me complaining, "Oh yeah, Neil, I'm feeling extremely tired, very exhausted. I don't know what's going on, especially in work. I'm just trying to basically boost up my stamina or trying to clear out all the brain fog." Or they complain to me, "Oh yeah, my thinking speed is actually reduced." And then I would think, well, did you have a history of COVID? And of course, any special events happen in your life. And oftentimes they would say, "Oh, yeah, I caught COVID like 3 months ago or about 4 weeks ago or something like that." And then they recall, "Oh, yeah, could this be like a part of the long COVID?" And at first I was like, "Okay, long COVID. I don't see that a lot in my practice." And then like they would say, "Oh, Neil, if you are not seeing that a lot in your practice, I'm gonna get a report from my family doctor." And then when they actually got the report back to me, then we all know it's officially diagnosed as long COVID. But mainly we just see these kind of like patients in generalized fatigue state. And from that, I did notice that, okay, basically about 80% of the current patient base of mine is having long COVID lingering fatigue syndrome. That's how we get to know that this patient is actually experiencing long COVID symptoms.
Wow. Yeah. So I know the definition is it has to be more than 3 months of these symptoms. Now,
Yes.
do you see that patients come back to you a year later and still have the symptoms too? It lingers for a chronic period of time?
I wouldn't say it's very rare to see patients coming back after a year or more than a year of these kind of symptoms, but I do see like reoccurring or more susceptible to like skin or eczema flare-ups. For fatigue, that's oftentimes related with like special life events after COVID and of course after their long COVID symptoms. For example, patient already caught long COVID or COVID, and of course, long COVID symptoms linger for about 3 months or so, or even 6 months. And of course, they go to their family doctor, they come to me, and of course, we help with their stamina, we help with their fatigue. They got better, and then they left, they've been discharged. And then
Mhm.
some life events happening, especially like in this summer, a lot of people went for hiking, right? And then they come back just these days saying, "Oh, Neil, I don't know why. Like 2 years ago, like during COVID or even before COVID, I can climb or hike for 20K, no problem. I don't feel tired at all. But I don't know what's going on this year. I feel my stamina just drastically reduced or drastically dropped. Like climb or I hike for 5 kilometers and I'm like wheezing and of course shortness of breath.
Mm.
I'm out of my breath. So I'm not sure what's going on with me. Can you have a look, please?" And now we start to go back to their history of, oh, what's the reason? And now it's oftentimes due to like the body's immune system or even the stamina being reduced. And then we need to think about ways to help the patients. More of that kind of condition, not really like persistent fatigue that is lingering for more than a year or so. It's more of episodes of fatigue.
Mm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So you mentioned immune system, which is hugely linked to your health and your symptoms and COVID as well. Can you tell us why do some people experience symptoms of long COVID and others don't? What are the main root causes that you've seen in your practice?
That's a very interesting topic, especially with immune systems, because in traditional Chinese medicine, we say your immune system is coming from your lung, the Wei Qi, right? So Wei means defensive or defense. Qi means the general energy, and of course, it literally translates to your defensive system. This kind of thing, or this defensive Wei Qi, this energy comes from your lung. And of course, since COVID is a respiratory problem, right? Respiratory condition after COVID, or especially with patients suffering from long COVID symptoms, their lung function is actually reduced, and of course, their lungs defensive system or lungs defensive function is actually in decline. So That is one of the reasons why you see some people experience like worsened or like more severe symptoms of long COVID, and some people just like, oh yeah, no, I didn't even catch COVID, right? So a lot of the individualized differences.
And why would somebody have a weakened lung and others don't? I got COVID in early 2021. I think it was January. And
Mm,
my symptoms felt like pins and needles in my throat a little
yeah.
bit, but I felt fine. I didn't have any fatigue. I was still working. And then I
Hmm.
recovered very well. But I know a lot of other people had obviously way worse symptoms. So, can you explain why the strength of their lung prior to catching COVID can actually determine the severity of the symptoms?
I see. Very good question. So, with that being said, first of all, we need to understand where does your lungs energy come from? It comes from your spleen and stomach. In TCM, in traditional Chinese medicine, so your lung is actually correlated with the element or the five element theory, a metal element, right? And where does the metal come from? It comes from earth, which is your spleen and stomach, your digestive system. So a lot of people, they do experience like worsened or more severe symptoms than other people due to their improper diet. We all know that during COVID time, right? People start cooking at home, and of course they started to learn, I'm stuck at home. I have nowhere to go, right? So they start to order takeouts. They just started to cook. And back then, of course, the groceries were relatively cheaper, and people are like, well, I'm working from home. I can do whatever I want. I can eat whatever I want. And then was a couple months of self-indulgence in good food, fried chicken, kind of those things, right? Pizza, drinks,
Yeah.
people's spleen and stomach system, their functioning of digestion and of course their functioning of nutrient absorption has also declined, which leads to the results that the spleen and stomach is not able to have enough energy reserve for the lung.
Mhm.
That's why leading to weakened lung symptoms. For me, I hate to admit, but for me, I actually was a part of the group that took too much of self-indulgence in good food, in improper diet, brain fog, and also like razor throat as well, and also chronic fatigue. But of course, after COVID, and of course with a year of self-recovery and of course needling, herbal remedies,
Mhm.
I got much better, and of course, I would say about 98% before compared with before COVID. But still, I do see a lot of patients, they got used to it. They got used to the long COVID symptoms and they are not really aware of it. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. I didn't know that the health of your lungs depend on your digestion from a TCM perspective. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Which kind of similar to the nutrition perspective where your immune system is in your gut. If you want to improve your immune system, you have to start with working on healing your gut and looking at your gut microbiome. So TCM is the same except there's kind of like the lung is in between the gut and the immune system, right? Is kind of what you mean?
Yes.
I feel like I have so many questions. So, with the lung being like the defensive system, and you mentioned obviously dietary habits influence both the digestion and the lungs, are there certain nutrition recommendations or traditional Chinese medicine foods that can help support both the gut and the lungs, or are they different foods?
There's actually a lot in traditional Chinese medicine perspective. It depends on which aspect you're actually trying to approach from. So from food perspective, you're able to take more of the Chinese yam or the
Mm.
lang yam, the very hairy, very brownish surface or skinned yam, and of course it's white inside. Oftentimes you can find them in Asian markets. Those are very
Mm.
good, extremely good in tonifying or strengthening your spleen and stomach, giving it enough energy reserve to generate or to help backing up the lung. And of course, it also lubricates and nourishes your lung as well. So it can effectively reduce persistent cough. And the other one food I want to recommend is lotus seed. Also very good in tonifying lungs, spleen, and stomach, and of course, reducing down the symptoms.
Okay, so it sounds like these are the type of foods you can get at like the Asian market, right? I know Chinese yam. I've seen it in the frozen section. I've actually used it to make chicken soup with it before. My listeners can just type it on Google and they'll be able to find it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, before we dive into a little deeper about nutrition, because I have more questions about that, I actually forgot to ask a question about the link between COVID and eczema. From what I know, my own clients and reading a little bit about the research, because eczema is a very immune system related condition, meaning it's related to how overactive your immune system can be, which is why people tend to have these flare-ups and they're triggered by, environmental changes, hormone changes, gut microbiome changes. What is the link between getting the COVID infection and skin flare-ups that you've seen in your practice?
For the linkage between COVID and also skin flare-ups, we need to go back to the linkage between lung and also the skin. So in traditional Chinese medicine, we say your skin, especially with hair or any kind of skin change or a topical change, that is related with the residue of your lungs qi or lungs energy or your immune system or the defensive qi, right? So after COVID of course goes back to a respiratory condition, respiratory symptoms, right? It has effect or influence to your lung, causing its function to decline. Your skin will show some changes accordingly to the declined lungs function. That's why I'm seeing a lot of flare-ups, especially for my patient base after their COVID or even long COVID symptoms. They're more susceptible to like skin itchiness, to eczema, to more carbuncles, to more acne as well. Yeah, more of that perspective.
Are these the same patients that have had eczema in the past before catching COVID, or it can also be a new symptom?
Both. But I would say about 60% of them never had any skin issues before. Never. Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there a severe eczema, or what kind of severity have you seen?
Main ones are, I would say, not really severe, but it's very bothersome. They have like skin
Oh,
changes or even lesions or even like say rashes developing in their chest, in their forearms, and of course very itchy, especially when they're like, hotter environment as well because of the lung. If you're Chinese or if you have a relatively Asian background, you always hear our parents or older generations people say you want to nourish your lung, right? So why we use the word nourish? Because lung is more of a yin organ. It wants water. It wants wet or damp environment, right? You want to moisten it, and of course, you want to keep it in a relatively high moisturized environment for better air exchange, right? For better oxygen exchange as well. But after COVID, you do see like flare-ups of the lung becomes drier. That's why your patients having or developing eczema, and of course their skin becomes drier or becomes like scale-like. All these kind
yeah.
of things. Yeah.
Itchy. Itchy is a very common symptom
Mhm.
too.
It's
I know my audience will ask this question, so I'm going to ask you, and you don't have to have the answer to this, but they will say, "But Julia, I have been," because most of my listeners, just for context, they're very health conscious. So they are always eating healthy, they always taking
Mhm.
supplements. They're doing all the things to heal their bodies, right? But even though they eat really well in their mind, they have a good lifestyle, they still get the post-COVID eczema symptoms.
Mhm.
So then they're confused. They're like, why, if I'm so healthy, why is it that I got such bad eczema after catching COVID? What do you think is the missing link there, if there is?
I would say the missing link here is more coming from a lung's self-recovering ability, which is leading to the exercise. Main thing is coming from that because especially after COVID or during COVID, people started to work from home, and then that's about 2 or even 3 years of basically lack of exercise or lack of outdoor environmented exercises or even activities. So people's lung have reduced that. In traditional Chinese medicine, our body, especially with eczema or all these kind of symptoms, you need to look from multiple or various combining perspectives for our body. As we mentioned, spleen and stomach linking to the element of earth, right? That also dominates our muscle. Your body has reduced or declined ability to tonify or generate your lung, which causing weakened or reduced pace of breathing and of course reduced amount of air exchange and cause your lungs
Mhm.
ability of air exchanging to also get weaker. And of course, as we mentioned, from that, that's the entire pathogenesis route or path your residue of the lung qi gonna reflect to your skin. That's why a lot of people they have eating healthy and eating well, but just the lack of exercise causing basically eczema and itchiness. Yes, or in a more of allopathic way to speak from you may hear this from your family doctor is that you did not sweat like you used to before. So that's why you're having eczema because all the sweat is trapped underneath your skin. Yeah, you need to exercise, make sure get a big, comfortable sweat, then your eczema will naturally clear out. All the toxins will be processed from your body.
It's a multifactorial approach, is what it sounds like, which is why healthy eating alone isn't really going to make the biggest difference, especially if there's other underlying root causes going on, is basically what you're saying, too. Exercise, very important, getting fresh air, grounding in nature. These are the things I love talking about because it's beyond just what the foods we eat, right? And also
Mhm.
looking deeper into like how good your digestion's actually working because you can eat very clean, all organic, but if your body's not absorbing those nutrients, then you're not really strengthening the gut or the lungs as efficiently as someone who is, right? So that's a good reminder to for people who are wondering why they feel weak still, but it's probably because your body's not absorbing or digesting as much as you think it is. And then the lifestyle too. So stress management is a huge piece. Okay, great. So then going back to food, so you mentioned lotus seed and yam. Now, are these foods also good for the skin as well, or indirectly because it supports the lungs and the digestive system?
Yes, these food are pretty good in helping people, especially with respiratory problems or even patients with eczema, with accompanying like persistent cough or breathing very shallowly. So these foods are very good. And also will clear out any fatigue, lingering fatigue symptoms as well. Yes.
Hmm. And how would you go about using the yams and lotus seed? Like what kind of like how do you incorporate that into your diet?
Good question. So, what I like to cook these kind of foods, or especially in my tradition that I basically cook Chinese in the majority of my cooking time, I would love to include them into a congee or a porridge, or maybe just steam these things. For lotus seed, you're able to just throw them into the salad that's dried or even like fresh ones. And for the Chinese yam, you're able to steam it and just eat like any carb resource you're able to find, like rice or anything like that. Make sure it's,
Mm.
steamed thoroughly. And of course, if you are a very neat or a very cooking oriented person, we can also try stir fry with Chinese yam. Peel off the skin and wash off the fluid leaking from the Chinese yam. Make sure it's very dry. Cut it in small pieces and of course, a little bit oil, olive oil, and then stir fry. A little
Mm.
bit salt and pepper. That's amazing.
Yeah, it just tastes like a potato to me, like a starchy
Basically,
potato.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's easy to cook relatively.
Mhm.
What other foods are good for the immune system?
For the immune system, you're able to have some goji berry. That's what we typically include in traditional Chinese style of cooking. If you're, having a Cantonese background, you know that always our parents would just cook soup, lao fo tang
Yeah,
for us, right? All these kind of like soup.
tongue.
And oftentimes our mom would just throw in a small thread or a small piece of American ginseng into that. It's very good in tonifying our body's energy. Very good in helping with fatigue, persistent chronic eczema as well. And of course, for
Okay.
the constipation or for the diarrhea, patients with accompanying like eczema happening, you're able to also have some nuts are pretty good for gut health and of course for boosting up your immune system because of it's very rich in oil, right?
Okay, so these are the foods that people can start to include in their diets if they have eczema, they want to support their immune system, fatigue, long COVID as well, right?
Non-COVID especially, yes.
Any other symptoms related to long COVID that these foods would be helpful for too? Because you also mentioned brain fog and muscle pain as well, right? Does that support
Mhm.
those symptoms as well?
As well, yes, but more from a different perspective. For like specifically speaking, for muscle pain, you want to eat more food that would help regenerate or tonify the spleen, and of course to gain more
Mm.
muscle mass. So beef would be very good. Beef, as in traditional Chinese medicine, would tonify your blood. So with all those kind of persistent eczema, especially with blurry vision, beef is very good. But of course, make sure you cook it with other food as well. And of course, oftentimes you need to eat beef in a soup or in a more of a liquid or in soup base, not instead of like stir fry. Because the thing is, in traditional Chinese medicine, it also have an attribute of where or which route does it go from, or does it go along. Beef actually goes on top of your skin. So for those people who are having like heat pattern or heat related eczema, or to be frankly speaking, when the eczema gets worse, when there's heat happening or when the temperature gets elevated, you would want to avoid eating beef because it's actually going to trigger the itchiness of the eczema. Yes, so that's why I would recommend people drink like beef stew or beef soup or like just even more pho, right?
Just to clarify, if they eat beef
Mhm.
during when it's hot, like the summer, it triggers their eczema?
Not really. So for traditional Chinese medicine, right, we have multiple diagnoses for one single problem. For eczema, most of the time it should be linking to like blood deficiency or even say heat related problems, right? So beef, while it's very good in tonifying the blood, it also goes on top of your skin. So when you're having access pattern like heat related eczema, when the temperature is hot and you become like very itchy, severe itchiness everywhere, right? From the eczema area, you would want to avoid eating beef. But for those people who are having eczema with blurry of vision, with like blood deficiency, or even during and after a menstrual cycle, after bleeding, right after bleeding, and then your eczema gets worsened, right? Beef would be very good for these group of people.
Wow, that is very specific because most of my clients actually they don't eat beef because beef has been found to be quite a trigger for some people with eczema. They typically eat like those whiter meats, so like chicken, fish,
Mhm.
turkey. But it's interesting that you're saying depending on the person, right? When they eat beef, it actually helps their skin.
Yes, it all
Okay.
depends because generally speaking, since we're talking about meat, red meat is more in the aspect of hot or heat. So
Hmm.
whenever you eat like beef or even lamb or mutton or goat, all these kind of like meat are pretty hot. One exception is pork. Pork is actually colder in like meat's attribute, in red meat's attribute. So that's why oftentimes you'll see in Asian cooking, when you cook braised pork, our mom typically gets a little piece of cinnamon bar or cinnamon bark into that to increase the flavor, right? Because cinnamon is very hot. So that oftentimes proven to be the trigger of the eczema as well for most of the people because it's very hot, right? So that's why we want to neutralize the attribute or the leniency or the bias of the food with other food. For
Mm.
whiter meat, it's oftentimes on the colder side. For fish, for all the kind of like shrimp, for chicken, for even other kind of like white meat, it's oftentimes in the colder side. But one exception as well, chicken is very good in tonifying qi. So after a lot of people or after in the tradition that when you are sick for a long time, we say, okay, you need to drink chicken stock or chicken soup, right? To help replenish your energy. That's what chicken is known for.
Wow, that's a lot of very detailed information about each food. I noticed that with TCM because you guys study all the herbs and the foods, right? So each
Yeah.
food can influence the body in so many different ways, which is why it's really important. If people prefer to have like a TCM treatment on their bodies, it's important to talk to you, right? A practitioner
Yes.
who knows these certain foods. Because even from my perspective as a dietitian, it's different, right? Like we look at
Mhm.
food a little bit differently than Chinese medicine, but I definitely use some of these foods in my own diet because I've seen the benefits of, making chicken soup, adding dates, and eating
Yes.
Chinese yam, black silky chicken, the black
Yes, black
chicken that
silky
you
chicken.
get. Yeah, that one is something I learned from my TCM doctor who said to eat that chicken during your menstrual cycle. It helps
Mhm.
to nourish your blood, correct?
Exactly, yes. Anything else I want to add? Maybe I'll just share a recipe for strengthening the body and, of course, strengthening the lung as well for eczema, for a lot of the chronic fatigue. Very simple ingredients. You can just add rice and millet. That's also a kind of grain. You can get it very easily in all the Asian supermarket. Some goji berry, maybe just 7 to 8 fruits and lotus seeds to your taste, to your preference, right? In the market, a lot of the lotus seeds are removed from their stem, so the green part. If you get the fresh or the whole lotus seed when you get home and you find they have the green stem, make sure you remove that. Pretty
Mm.
good in reducing like heat or fever sensation. But if you don't have any of that, make sure you remove that because it tastes very bitter. Red dates like 3 to 5 fruits, and then just cook everything together, make it into a more of a condensed, sticky form of porridge, and then just enjoy it. Very good in strengthening your body, boosting up your immune system.
Is there a best time to have this recipe?
Typically speaking, we would have porridge at night, right? So it's more of a tradition, but doesn't really matter. You can have it for breakfast, for lunch.
Amazing, Neil. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and sharing your expertise and knowledge around everything we talked about today, long COVID, immune system, eczema. How can my listeners get in touch with you? How can they find you?
Well, they can just find me on different social media platforms as the name is TCM with Neil. And of course, you can always reach me at tcmwithneil.com or tcmwithneil@gmail.com if you prefer to email me.
And do you do online consultations too with clients?
Typically speaking, yes, but that was only during COVID time. In these days, due to the regulation of the college, we need to go back to the in-person consultation.
So if anybody wants to book a consultation with Neil and they want to see him in person, then they can find all the information there.
Sounds good. Thank you, Julia.
Thanks, Neil, for coming.